Welcome everyone to the podcast. Let's go beyond the connection. And today we have a very special guest on, and I'm going to explain a little bit and ask Chris to explain a little bit more about your background. So it's really fascinating. But Chris Demery, you've been in the military. That's taught you a ton of how you work as a leader, how you lead, how you work with a high performance team. You've been on the technology side. You've been on the operations side. You've helped launch and build new restaurants. You've worked at PF Chang's, Domino, some of the biggest names in the industry. And what we're going to be talking about here today is a part of our series on the digital kitchen and how it really powers the entire future of dining. And you call it the epicenter, the command center of the business, what happens in the digitized kitchen today, and what that means for us from marketing to operations to point of sale to the future and the growth of the business is now center stage. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But I'd love to have you, if you don't mind, just explain a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Steve. So I was in the military. I was in the military for 13 years. I got out as a major, and what I learned was it really is about the team that you have, not the individual contributor. And when I exited the military, I went into retail with NCR and then eventually landed my first restaurant company at Domino's Pizza. And I've learned pretty quickly, we built all our own stuff at Domino's Pizza because we would only build if it was a competitive advantage. But I learned a lot about operations, food costs, labor costs, how to build things that operators actually use versus things that people in ivory towers think they should use. So I really enjoyed my time at Domino's Pizza to build out their tech stack, and was subsequently recruited by Bloomin Brands, where I got to continue my technology background. But I had a real opportunity at Bloomin Brands while I was there to build operations because of my expertise in off-premises. And so I've surrounded myself with some good leaders and worked very closely with the IT team at Bloomin Brands to build out their off-premises strategy and to prove that off-premises was a continuing growth, and primarily because our guests change over time. The dine-in traffic has been on a downward trend for going into restaurants for years. Off-premises is really a premier growth engine for most restaurants. After Bloomin Brands, I went to CKE, where I was in a technology role again, and then I got recruited into another operation role at PF Chang's, where I rolled out PF Chang's to go and revitalize their off-premises activities in their 200 locations that they had, the four-wall locations. So it's been an interesting experience, and then getting to bring it all together at Blaze Pizza, where my primary job is to support marketing and operations and to improve the guest experience through the digital kitchen. So that's a little bit about my background.
Great. And you kind of left that as the big part of responsibility, always the guest experience. If you could just give us from your years of wisdom here, the importance of the technology and the digital kitchen of today becoming a core engine for both growth, revenue, profitability of the business, but that customer experience or the guest experience.
As restaurant operators, we have a lot of opportunities to mess things up and to not make the guest experience the supreme experience that it should be. But our guests are the ones that pay the bills. As a technologist supporting both operations and marketing, part of my job is to support those teams in removing all guest friction because they pay bills. The guest doesn't know how hard it is or how hard it could be to implement technology to smooth out their experience. But the operators certainly know when technology gets in the way, and marketing certainly knows when you have a poorly stitched together system. Technology has to fit in seamlessly across the entire landscape because you can't make something more difficult for an operator believing that it's going to fit in this seamlessly. And the same thing from a digital marketing perspective. So I'm not talking TV ads and things like that. I'm talking about websites, mobile, whether you're doing kiosks, whether you're doing QR code ordering. A guest has to feel, I hate to use the word omnichannel, but it's a channel experience. They get to pick what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. And if you make it seamless across those channels from the marketing perspective or e-commerce perspective, they will come back to you with frequency. So I think the digital ecosystem within a restaurant has to make those guests want to return because it's consistent and persistent. And operations has to be able to deliver that consistency so that they will continue coming back.
It does. In our previous conversation, you called it the triumvirate of technology, operations, and marketing.
Yeah, in the restaurant industry, we're not a technology company. We're a restaurant company. And so supply chain plays a role in providing good food, and HR plays a role in providing good people. But I find myself every day sitting down with our head of operations, my head of marketing, going, what are we doing today to fix whatever happened yesterday, or to drive incremental traffic into our locations for top line sales? What are we doing tomorrow and the week after?
Obviously, as a C-suite individual in the organization, you have responsibilities beyond just technology. And what you're talking about there was typical marketing roles and responsibilities of driving traffic and growing revenue. Not all technologists have a seat at the table, but I know that you feel like you have a very strong seat at the table. And what does that allow you to do from your perspective that maybe other technologists don't have? And what do you recommend to them? How do you get that seat at the table? Because it's an earned seat. Just because you have a title doesn't mean that you're pulled into the right meetings and you're in all the right conversations. Like, how do you earn that seat at the table?
Guess the way I'm going to go to a military phrase that I use, do something I call lead from the front. When I don't understand a situation, I dive into the detail and understand the details behind whatever initiative we're trying to do. I think I've earned the right at a seat at the table with the companies I've been with, because if I'm talking to an operator, I'm talking operator speak, if you will, so that they understand, oh, you understand cost of goods sold, you understand labor costs, you understand that if you use the wrong people on a busy Friday, that my efficiency in my restaurant may not be what I really want. And when I'm talking to the marketing guy or girl, and I say, are you sure you want to drive people to that channel? Because that channel is less profitable because of what you're offering and when you're offering it, because we do channel analytics. And part of that comes from my experience as an operator. I know that a Friday at 4:30, that's probably our highest rush day of the week, like it is for most restaurants. And Tuesdays are our lowest volumes. So why aren't you driving traffic on Tuesdays when the operators have more capacity than they have on a Friday? And when I say more capacity, they're less busy, there's fewer guests, so they have the ability to ramp up. So I routinely talk about marketing. Let's do value offers on our slowest days of the week, and let's go promote our highest profit items, even if the guests like those items. Obviously, if the guests don't like their items, you're not going to go promote them. So I think I have a seat at the table, because when we're talking about all of that, they're like, how in the world do you figure all that out? Now I've had the opportunity. I use Domino's as my kind of gold standard for technology integration to the business, not because of its technology, but because they understand how to make a business run and make it profitable. They've done a very good job. So that's sort of my gold standard. Every business is slightly different. Blaze Pizza is different than Domino's Pizza. And P.F. Chang's was different as a high-end casual dining or fine dining, was different than Fleming's or Bonefish Grill. So probably different, but they're not as different as a lot of people believe.
One of my big takeaways from what you're saying here is that you have a responsibility to understand the business and how it operates and how the different departments interlock between each other. That military analogy and having the right team, you have to have the right team. Every company succeeds because it has high performance teams. And if you understand those teams, their responsibilities, how they fit together, but you understand business language and acronyms, and you could actually even talk to somebody on the board of directors, puts you in a position where you can make recommendations that are good for the business.
Being able to talk that way being able to understand the business pretty quickly, even though it's the food business. So a lot of people would say it's exactly the same, but you have to understand some of the nuances. As a technology person, the faster you can pick that up, then the operators start to trust you. The marketing team starts to trust you. The CFO starts to trust you. We're like, Chris needs a bigger seat at the table, whether or not he knows how to identify the gaps that we don't have expertise with. And then I make recommendations on how to fill the gaps, because that's my number one leadership principle. Understand what your gaps are and then fill those based on the business you're in.
So this plays well now into that's the foundation. And then all of that is so that we grow our businesses, we scale our businesses. But then you run into problems that you've addressed many times over, delivering consistency at scale. And how do you ensure repeatable, consistent guest experiences across hundreds of locations? And how does the digital kitchen play in that role?
So people don't like change. And the only way to ensure consistent performance, I would say, is to measure it. So the advantage technology has is it can do timestamps and things like that based on actions that operators take, versus having an operator try to remember, I need to know how long it's taking to produce a pizza. And so by implementing technology at the critical pieces within an operations can help you predict what your speed of service is going to be. Just as an example, how long does it take to take an order, make an order, and deliver an order to the guest? From my experience, I always focus on speed of service. And my analogy is like the automotive industry. They know exactly how long it takes to manufacture a car from start to finish. And it takes a lot longer than it does to manufacture a pizza from start to finish. But they have digital systems that record all the pieces and keep track of everything. And then they refine their manufacturing process off what the data tells them. So the digital kitchen allows you to capture the data and make business decisions based on what the data is telling you. It's still very dependent on people because not everything happens without somebody doing something. But the capabilities of digital today allow you to measure speed of service. And what I found is that restaurant guests have an expectation around, first of all, food quality, but they also have expectations around speed of service. If you walk into a McDonald's, I want my food in 3 to 4 minutes. If I walk into Fleming's Prime Steakhouse, I probably want a 45-minute to an hour and a half experience. I don't want my food in 3 to 4 minutes. So understanding what that guest expectation is very important, and then modifying or calibrating your digital systems around the expectations of your guest. Our big risk is our guest expectations are changing even faster than they used to. And COVID caused part of that because everybody went to off premises and some people didn't go sit down. And now with AI, I think everybody's expectation is going to change. I think the last time I checked, fast casual expectation was 8 to 12 minutes to get their food from start to finish. It's predicted in 2030 to be 4 to 5 minutes. So if you don't know how long it's taking, you could rapidly fall out of what I call the consideration set of a guest, whether they're walking in and sitting down or whether they're ordering online.
So there's the speed of operations in that experience and how it's delivered. There's the consistency in it. And then you talked before about, but you can't add complexity for the operators. Like you can't add friction for the operators. Yet what you just talked about, that was almost a 50% reduction in the manufacturing of a pizza, the time to do that. How do you think about this in terms of the operator side and how technology is helping the operators? Because they're going to have to do things quicker, faster than they've done before. How do you think about that side?
When I was with NCR, I actually went through Six Sigma training. So I'm a black belt in Six Sigma. And the philosophy is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so I think by providing data to the operator, let's just say the guest expectation is 8 to 12 minutes for fast casual. If you're at 15 minutes, you probably know I need to do something. I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. It might be to train the person taking the order for walk the line orders improve their ability to get the order into the system faster to reduce that guest time. It could be, I need a new oven that cooks a pizza in 2 minutes instead of 4 minutes. But if you don't know how long it takes on average with copious amounts of data, you can't set a benchmark and say, okay, now I need to go address how long it's taking. Particularly if it shrinks by 100% over the next 5 years, you're going to have to know how long it's taking so you can get better at it. And this is what I always say. If you're not in the competitive mindset of the guest, you've already lost. If they're not even considering coming to you because it takes too long and your food quality is bad, you've already lost the battle. So you have to stay on top of, what do my guests think? Am I meeting their speed of service objectives? And then how does technology help me understand where I'm at? And then how do I get better?
One of the things that we talked about is, because a lot of what you're talking about is collecting a lot of data. And there's a kind of a predictive side to the digital kitchen that allows you to predict not only outcomes in aggregate and improve metrics and KPIs and deliver faster, better experience, but there's also a predictive side of what's happening today in my location and how AI is helping us transform the digital kitchen. And how are you seeing that happen today?
So there's a couple different things. We use AI in our back-end kitchen display platform. So our kitchen display platform from Fresh Tech, they're in Nashville, they aggregate every order that comes through our kitchen and learns how long it's taking to manufacture that order. So it's not so much the items, but the order itself. We use that to measure what we call kitchen efficiency. So if you're a highly efficient kitchen, you can go focus on other aspects of guest experience or product quality versus just how fast you're producing it. Now, we look at the data from yesterday, today. My vision is what I had at Domino's. I want that data presented to the manager near real time. And when I talk about near real time, I'm talking about I need data provided to the person in charge, the shift leader, general manager, whatever you call them at that point. This updated within the last 5 minutes. Now, I have a lot of people that go, oh, you couldn't possibly do anything with data like that. You're wrong. For instance, if I forecasted what we call fast-fired items per hour over from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, and something could tell me, you know what? Something's going on that your forecast is being exceeded by 20%. So you're exceeding what we forecasted you would do. And if you don't do something, your quality of service is going to go down, because being staffed for a certain forecast and you get a 20% increase, that's a big difference. Now, by the way, I really, really wish we could get 20% increases every day. The opposite is what normally happens is your forecast is wrong and you have 10% less. So you need to cut people. So you're trying to manage your labor. And so all of this data, my ultimate goal is what I had at Domino's, which was near real-time data that allows somebody running a restaurant to make a decision, not telling them what to do, but you have something you need to address. Because what I've found is that our managers are more hands-on than ever before. They don't have the luxury of standing back and not either prepping food, dealing with guest complaints, whatever it happens to be. They're heads down. And so some of our people have lost what I call situational awareness. They don't have the time to raise their head out of the sand and go, man, I have a line of 20 people at the door. I wonder how long it's taken me to take orders right now. Do I need to go give everybody free drinks? So there's a whole set of activities that data and near real-time data from a digital kitchen can provide to operators.
So naturally what's going to happen here is this is impacting the way that you're training your operators too, in a big way. Because we could have all the right technology and alert systems and data and information, but if the people aren't trained on the system, so how does technology come into the training component of this?
So as I work with operations and marketing, every new system that we embrace and say, we're going to roll this out or we're going to go pilot it, I work with our operations services team, which is also our training component, where we build out why this is important, what you should do. So there's essentially instructional guide associated with any new technology that we roll out that the operations team says, okay, this is how we're going to go train this. And we have to keep it really, really simple. We can't tell them to look at every metric in the book. Like, look at this, look at this, look at this. I have a lot of vendors that say, look, if you just go run this report, the data's right there. I'm like, you don't understand restaurant operations. Nobody's taking the time at 5 o'clock on a Friday to go run a report. If it's urgent, we need like a heads up display. By the way, we don't have those yet. But ideally, you would have heads up display that says something's going on. As soon as you have an opportunity, go try to figure out how to deal with it. But I work so closely with the ops team, whether it's new kiosks, whether it's QR code ordering, whether it's kitchen display system, all of that flows through our training component into how do we communicate this to the field in a seamless fashion and keep it simple.
What's interesting about all of this is it's all dependent and reliant on real-time data, real-time information, which means it is reliant on your network. And you don't have, I would imagine, an IT manager at every location. So you're trying to create a highly resilient network in a distributed location environment where there is more and more edge computing that's happening every day, and that's going to continue to scale. How do you think about just deploying and having confidence in your network that runs all of this, everything we've been talking about so far?
You know, for good or bad, we have a franchise disclosure document that has IT components within it, which means I can mandate any technology. And I think my department's the only one that can mandate whatever technology they want or anything they want in the FTD, but it's primarily because of security. And I have to protect those remote locations. Now, I don't do that loosely, if you will. I don't mandate a technology just because I think it's a good idea. I have to provide an ROI. So I require a specific network stack. And just recently, I mandated we're doing 5G backup in all of our locations because our internet service providers periodically go down. And if you go offline for a day, you can lose $300, $400, $500 in off-premises orders. So we are a hybrid, because our guests require it. We are a hybrid environment where 30% of our sales are off-premises and 70% are walk the line. So every hour that I can keep the restaurant online increases top-line sales. So I mandated that a year ago. We're in the process of rolling it out. And so I look at the opportunities to drive top-line sales and then work with operations to say, here's what we're going to go do. Here's why, but I always do a business case associated with it. And there's always change management that has to happen with franchisees that are going to go spend another $20 per month for a more stable environment. But once you present the business case to them and say, yeah, but you're getting 3,000 more a month in sales, they're like, okay, put it in all my locations. So part of my job is to build a business case that is reflective of marketing and operations initiatives.
So we can't afford downtime these days, and it has huge impact on the business. When you say, I have to create the case, what is that case? Now, you went through maybe some of it there, but you had to make a case internally. You had to make a case externally to your operators, to the owners of the franchisees, to everyone. It seems like it shouldn't be hard to make that case today. But tell me about the difficulties in the sell-through and what you had to do there.
Well, there's various people you have to sell to. Like Bloomin Brands, I did the off-premises work. The CEO and the CFO said, you need to go prove this works in 2 locations. So I went to one Outback and one Carrabba's, and I proved within 90 days that I could drive incremental traffic to the location of 1%, and I could drive incremental off-premises by 5%. And they came back and they said, how fast can you roll this out to 1,000 locations? Because a 1% dine-in traffic lift compared to a 5% traffic decline on average is huge. That's a 6-point swing. Off-premises is repeat guest frequency. And then what we found at Bloomin Brands was if they like your off-premise experience, you're top of mind for your dine-in experience. So there's multiple things that come into play. So it's all around, you have to put everything into a return on investment model that almost every CFO, CEO, and investor understands. It says, if we can go make this work and stick it's going to be X% top line growth, or what they typically look like, or what's the middle of my P&L from a profitability perspective. So you have to play all those components, and you have to understand the whole idea of capital investment up front, operational costs month to month, and then what key process indicators is that affecting? Because I don't know a board that's not interested in increased top line with improved profitability so they can either go sell the company to somebody else at an increased value, or investor EPS, earnings per share, goes up because you're driving continued growth and you're a public company. So I understand all those components. Yeah.
You just brought so much of this entire conversation here together. What you just did right there was a business ROI analysis. So we talked earlier about you have to understand the business. You have to understand your individual audiences or customers internally, whether it's operations you're talking to or marketing you're talking to, the board that you're talking to. So you really have to understand all that. You talked about your Six Sigma background. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So you set out, and to do that ROI analysis, you identified, it sounds like, the things that needed to be measured to begin with so that you could prove the performance difference in the change. I love the way that you're training us to think like business people, because we're a business. That's the bottom line. Everything we do has to support the customer experience that improves performance in the business.
The one thing I would add to that, because I thought of it as you were kind of summarizing what I said, the most important thing I learned at Domino's is the concept of an agile mentality. And you've probably heard, I haven't listened to all your podcasts, but everybody talks about an agile mentality. It is a mentality. It's not a fixed project management approach. And a good technology person that understands operations and marketing, what most technology people will tell you is, I have to build the entire solution before I can put it in one location. But the agile mentality is, how about I introduce a compromised solution in order to prove I could even be feasible to deliver the result? So today, the big thing is voice AI phone ordering. Oh, you ought to implement that. There's a cost to going out and building that, to pilot it in one location. There's another approach where you could pilot, do your guests even want to order by phone? Now, if you go out to ChatGPT, it'll say 20 to 25% of all fast casual people order over the phone. And so if you have 0% adoption of phone orders, the opportunity is almost unlimited. So why don't you go see if your guests want to order from you over the phone? Now, all the digital companies will tell you, I want to order on the web and the app. That's what everybody wants to do. But if you don't know what your market segment is for people over 50 or 55, ours is 30% of our guests are over 50 years old. I would argue that a lot of them don't use smartphones, believe it or not.
I got to tell you, I would love to have this conversation go 2 hours because this is fascinating. But we've covered so much territory here. If there was one thing that you wanted other chief technology officers that are at fast casual, QSR restaurants, the industry that you're in, to take away from our conversation today, the most important thing, what would that be?
I thought about it a little bit, and I've been having a very relevant conversation with our CEO and CFO and the board lately. There's more and more articles that come out about speed of service, and I mentioned it during this discussion. And for the fast casual guest, today it's 8 to 12 minutes. That's for the dine-in experience. It's not the off-premises experience. What I've learned in doing this across 5 brands is that the expectation of the off-premises guest is predictability around what you told them it was going to be. So if you tell them it's going to be 30 minutes, their expectation around speed of service is around that 30-minute mark because you told them that's what it was. And so as digital business grows, you really have 2 speeds of service definitions. One is around dine-in experience. The other is around how predictable are you of your off-premises. Because if you tell somebody it's going to be 20 minutes, you need to be plus or minus 2 minutes on delivery. Whereas in restaurant, it's 8 to 12 minutes total duration. The expectation of guests is different for off-premises. And we're 30%. Our goal is to get to 50% off-premises. Because just think about it. I only have 40 tables in a Blaze Pizza location. I have 400,000 outside the location.
Well, in that what you can promise as speed of service means you need that real time now, not looking at yesterday's information. You need that real time information out of that digital kitchen, that connected kitchen right now in order to make those promises.
And the best analogy is if you go to any fast QSR, quick service restaurant brands that have drive-throughs, every one of them has a drive-through timer that says how fast are the vehicles getting through the line, because 70 to 80% of their business is driving through the line because the guests want experience. And if they get over 3 or 4 minutes and there's a parking lot full of cars, people are going to turn around and walk out the door, just like they do in a fast casual restaurant. When there's a big long line and you're not going very fast, they walk out, they go someplace else.
I have to tell you, Chris, the mission of this podcast is to bring really important visions on how the industry overall is working, how important data, our networks, the technology that runs it all is. And if we can bring different experiences and perspectives and insights together from folks like you as chief technology officers and share it with the rest, we all benefit. And I call that the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were phenomenal at that today. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.